I'm Elena Vance, 44, and I worked my way from a quiet, unsure kid of a single mom to a one-star admiral. For years, I did everything I could to support the people I loved, especially my mother, no matter how busy or stretched I was. But when her new boyfriend snatched my phone during a secure call and tried to scream at me, I drew a line I should have drawn much earlier. Have you ever been dismissed, underestimated, or flat-out disrespected by someone you tried to protect? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're definitely not the only one. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after someone pushed too far, tap that like button and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, strength, and taking your power back. What happened next? Well, it caught everyone off guard. I freeze mid-sentence when I hear his footsteps behind me. The voice on the line is mid-briefing, something about fleet readiness schedules, nothing classified, but definitely official. I'm holding the phone close, listening carefully, when Sergeant First Class Brad Keller walks into the kitchen and stops short. "You're still on that thing," he mutters. His tone carries that edge I've started to recognize, half annoyance, half something darker. "You kids and your constant calls." I'm 44 years old. Before I can turn around or pull the phone away, his hand shoots out and grabs it from my ear. The movement is quick, practiced, like he's done this before, taken something that wasn't his to take. "Stop playing games," he shouts into the receiver, his voice sharp and commanding. "I am talking to you." My mother gasps from the doorway. I stand frozen, watching this man, this stranger my mother has been dating for 6 months, yell into my phone like he has any right to it. Then everything stops. A calm voice comes through the speaker, clear enough that I can hear it from where I'm standing. "This is the president." Put Admiral Vance back on the phone. Brad's face drains of all color. His hand trembles. He looks at the phone like it's suddenly turned into something dangerous, something that might bite. He drops it onto the counter with a clatter that makes Mom flinch. He stares at it, then at me, then back at the phone. Mom's hand is over her mouth. Her eyes are wide, confused, searching my face for an explanation I haven't given her yet. I pick up the phone with steady hands, the same hands that have signed deployment orders and tactical briefings. "This is Admiral Vance. I apologize for the interruption, sir." My voice is professional, measured, like nothing just happened. "Please continue." The call lasts another 2 minutes. I confirm the scheduling details, acknowledge the directive, and disconnect with the appropriate protocol. The entire time, Brad stands motionless near the counter, his breathing shallow and uneven. When I set the phone down, the silence in the kitchen is suffocating. "Elena," Mom finally whispers. "What just?" "I was on a call," I say quietly. I look at Brad, not with anger, but with something closer to exhaustion. A secure call. He opens his mouth, closes it. His jaw works like he's trying to find words that won't come. Finally, he manages, "I didn't know you grabbed my phone out of my hand," I say. The statement hangs there, simple and undeniable. "While I was speaking. You didn't ask. You just took it." Mom looks between us, her face pale. "Brad, what were you thinking?" He straightens slightly, trying to recover some composure. "I thought she was ignoring me." "I thought," he stops, realizing how that sounds. "I didn't know she was talking to." Another pause. "I mean, how was I supposed to know?" "You could have waited," I say. "You could have not grabbed someone else's property." The word property makes him flinch. He's military enough to understand the weight of it, the formality, the distance I'm putting between us. "Look," he says, his voice taking on a forced reasonableness. "This got out of hand. I was just trying to get your attention by yelling," I finish. "By taking my phone. By screaming at whoever was on the other end." Mom sinks into a chair at the kitchen table. She's not looking at either of us now. She's staring at her hands, folded tightly in her lap. Brad tries again. "In my defense, I didn't think you were actually on an important call." "You've been on the phone all weekend." "I'm in operations," I say. The words are flat, factual. "I take calls. That's part of my job." "Right, but," he stops himself, seeming to realize that every sentence he starts is only making things worse. "Look, can we reset this?" I don't answer immediately. I'm thinking about all the small moments from this visit, moments I dismissed because I didn't want to create problems in my mother's home. The comments about women in command. The way he corrected her when she told a story. The irritation when she didn't move fast enough to suit him. The little tests of control disguised as jokes or concern. I think I say carefully that you should think about why you felt entitled to do what you just did. His face hardens. For a second, I see the real anger underneath, the kind that's been simmering all weekend whenever I didn't defer to him the way he expected. Entitled? I was trying to have a conversation with you. You were being rude. I was on the phone, I repeat. With the president. The words stop him cold again. He seems to shrink slightly, the reality of what happened finally sinking in past his defensiveness. Mom stands abruptly. I need some air, she says, her voice thin. She walks out through the back door, leaving Brad and me alone in the kitchen. We stand there in silence. I can see him struggling, trying to find a way to reframe this, to make it smaller than it is. But there's no walking this back. The phone is still on the counter between us, a physical reminder of the line he crossed. I should go, he finally says. That might be best, I agree. He leaves without another word. I hear him gather his things from the living room, hear the front door open and close. Through the window, I watch him get into his truck and sit there for a long moment before starting the engine. When Mom comes back inside, her eyes are red. She doesn't ask if he left. She already knows. How long? I ask gently. She understands what I'm asking. How long has he been like this? How long has she been managing his moods, his need for control, his quickness to anger when things don't go his way? It's been building, she admits. She sits back down at the table, and I take the chair across from her. Little things at first. I thought he was just adjusting, getting comfortable. But lately, she trails off, but I can fill in the rest. Lately it's gotten worse. Lately she's been walking on eggshells. Lately she's been making herself smaller to keep him calm. Mom, I say. He grabbed my phone out of my hand. He screamed at the President of the United States. I know, she whispers. If he'd do that to me, I know, she says again, louder this time. Her hands are shaking. I know what you're going to say. And you're right. We sit together in the quiet kitchen, the afternoon light slanting through the windows. I think about all the times I've counseled junior officers about toxic leadership, about boundaries, about the difference between strength and control. I think about how much easier it is to see these things clearly when they're happening to someone else. I'm sorry, Mom says. I should have seen it sooner. Don't apologize to me, I tell her. You didn't do anything wrong. But she did, in a way. She let him make her believe his behavior was normal, acceptable, something she needed to manage. And I let her because I didn't want to overstep, didn't want to interfere in her relationship. The betrayal isn't just what he did to me. It's that he felt entitled to do it at all. And the larger betrayal, the one that makes my chest tight, is seeing how much my mother has diminished herself trying to make space for his ego. Mom raised me alone. That's the context that matters when understanding why this hurts the way it does. My father left when I was 3. No dramatic exit, no big fight. He just stopped coming home one day. Mom never spoke badly of him, but she also never made excuses. She simply explained that some people aren't built for the weight of responsibility, and we'd be fine without him. And we were fine. More than fine. She worked 2 jobs through most of my childhood, administrative assistant during the day, bookkeeping for a small accounting firm 3 evenings a week. The schedule was brutal, but she never complained. Never made me feel like a burden. She drove me to early morning swim practices before school, picked me up after debate team, somehow found time to help with homework and college applications and academy preparation. When I got my acceptance letter to the Naval Academy, she cried. Not sad tears, proud ones. She framed the letter and hung it in the hallway, right next to my high school diploma. She attended every commissioning ceremony she could manage. Ensign to lieutenant, junior grade to lieutenant commander. Each time, she'd wear the same navy blue dress and sit in the same spot if she could, 3rd row, aisle seat, and beam with a pride so fierce it almost hurt to look at. When I made commander, she brought a camera and took so many photos that other families started asking her to take theirs too. She didn't mind. She was just happy to be there, to witness what her sacrifices had built. The day I pinned on my captain's bars, she whispered, "Your father would have been proud." It was the first time she'd mentioned him in years, and I knew what she meant. Not that he deserved credit, but that even he, wherever he was, would have had to acknowledge what I'd become. And when I picked up my Admiral star last year, she cried in a way I'd never seen before. Deep, shaking sobs that she tried to hide behind her program. I found her afterward in the reception area, makeup smeared, still crying, and she grabbed both my hands and said, "You did this. All you. I just drove the carpool." But that wasn't true. She'd done so much more than that. The problem is that somewhere along the way, she got lonelier. It happened gradually, the way these things do. I was deployed more, stationed farther away. She retired from her bookkeeping job. The house got quieter. Her friends started pairing off with widowers or settling into retirement communities in Arizona and Florida. She started talking about wanting companionship. Not romance, she'd clarify quickly, like she needed to justify it. Just someone steady. Someone to have dinner with. Someone who understands routine and structure. When she first mentioned Brad, SFC in the Army, solid guy, very dependable, I thought it made sense. Someone with military background would understand the lifestyle, the demands, the long absences. Someone with rank would carry himself with a certain discipline. I didn't see the warning signs at first because I was looking for different problems. I was worried about financial exploitation or someone taking advantage of her loneliness. I wasn't watching for someone who would use structure as a weapon, who would turn dependability into control. The first time I met him was last Christmas. He was polite in that stiff, formal way some NCOs get around officers they don't know well. Called me ma'am, with just a hint of something I couldn't quite identify, not disrespect exactly, but not genuine deference either. More like he was measuring me, trying to figure out where I fit in his understanding of how things should work. He didn't ask what I did. He guessed. "You're Navy, right? Logistics? Maybe admin?" I corrected him lightly. "I'm in operations." He smirked. "Everyone's in operations these days." Mom laughed, trying to ease the tension I don't think she fully recognized. "Elena's being modest. She's actually in operations," he finished for her. She said. The conversation moved on, but that moment stuck with me. The way he assumed. The way he cut her off. The casual dismissiveness masked as humor. Over the next few visits, I started noticing more. The way he'd criticize how she loaded the dishwasher, "There's a right way and a wrong way, Caroline." The way he'd call her Care or Caro, shortened versions of her name she'd never used before. The way he'd get irritated if she didn't respond to him immediately, even if she was in the middle of something else. "He's just direct," Mom would say when I gently probed. "He says what he means." I appreciate that after years of people being passive-aggressive. But there's a difference between direct communication and domination. Between having preferences and requiring submission. I told myself I was overreacting. That I was seeing problems that weren't there because I was used to command environments where every interaction was scrutinized. That Mom deserved companionship and I shouldn't judge her choices. But the warning signs were there. In his posture, always taking up the most space in whatever room he entered. In his need to have the final word on every topic, even ones he knew nothing about. In his casual disregard for boundaries, treating her home like his territory to control. I should have paid closer attention. I should have asked harder questions. But I didn't want to be the overprotective daughter who couldn't let her mother have a relationship. I didn't want to use my rank or my career as an excuse to bulldoze her autonomy. So I watched and worried and said nothing concrete. Until he grabbed my phone. Until he screamed at the president. Until the mask slipped completely and Mom had to see what I'd been seeing all along. The betrayal hurts because of what Mom gave up to keep him calm. Her space. Her voice. Her right to make simple decisions without commentary or correction. She shrunk herself piece by piece, thinking that's what partnership required, and I stood by and let it happen because I didn't want to overstep. Looking back now, I can see exactly how it progressed. How he tested boundaries with small things, comments about her cooking, suggestions about her clothes, opinions about how she should spend her time. How he framed control as care, criticism as helpful feedback. How he made her feel like she was being difficult when she pushed back, unreasonable when she wanted things her own way. And how she accepted it, step by step, because she was lonely and he was there, and he seemed so certain about everything. The phone incident didn't create the problem. It just made it impossible to ignore. The silence after Brad leaves stretches for hours. Mom moves through the house like she's not sure what to do with herself. She starts to make tea, forgets about it, finds the kettle cold an hour later. She sits on the couch with a book she doesn't read. She folds and refolds the same dish towel. I give her space, but stay present. I don't push conversation, don't demand explanations. I just exist in the same rooms, a quiet reminder that she's not alone in this. As evening settles in, she finally speaks. I need to tell you something, she says. We're in the living room, her on the couch and me in the armchair Dad used to claim before he left. About Brad. About how things have been. You don't have to, I do, she interrupts gently. I need to say it out loud. So I listen. She tells me about the small controls that built up over months. How he started timing how long she took at the grocery store, asking why she needed 45 minutes for a 15-item list. How he began checking her text messages, casually at first, who's Jennifer? But with increasing frequency. How he'd criticize her clothes if they seemed too bright, too casual, too anything he decided was inappropriate for a woman her age. He said I needed structure, Mom explains, her voice small. That I'd gotten too used to being on my own, making decisions without considering anyone else. He made it sound like growth. Like partnership. I think about leadership training, about how abusers use the language of improvement to justify control. How they frame their behavior as helping when they're really diminishing. He'd get upset if I changed plans without telling him first, she continues. Even plans for my own day. If I decided to meet a friend for lunch instead of running errands, he'd say I was being inconsiderate. That I wasn't thinking about how my choices affected him. But they were your choices, I say quietly. About your own time. I know, she whispers. I know that now. But in the moment, he made it sound so reasonable. Like I was being selfish by not checking with him first. She tells me about dinners where he'd correct how she told stories, interrupting to add important details she'd missed or to contradict her version of events. About times he'd answering questions people asked her, speaking for her like she wasn't capable of representing herself. About the way he'd sigh heavily when she took too long to make a decision, making his impatience into her problem. The worst part, she says, is that I started to believe him. I started to think maybe I was being difficult. Maybe I did need someone to help me be more organized, more considerate, less. Less what? Just less, she repeats. Less loud. Less opinionated. Less myself. My hands tighten on the armrests. I'm thinking about the sailors I've disciplined for exactly this kind of boundary violation. About the junior officers I've relieved of command for creating hostile environments. About how crystal clear these situations are when you're evaluating them professionally, and how murky they become when you're living inside them. Mom, I say carefully, has he ever? No, she says quickly, understanding what I'm asking. Not physical. Never physical. Just. She searches for the word. Relentless. Like water eroding stone. Constant little corrections and criticisms and concerns that all sound reasonable individually, but together just wear you down. I nod. I've seen this pattern in toxic leadership too, death by 1,000 cuts, each one too small to warrant formal action, but together creating an environment where people can't breathe. When he grabbed your phone, Mom says, I saw it. Really saw it. The entitlement. The assumption that he had the right to control what was happening, even when it had nothing to do with him. She looks at me directly now, her eyes clearer than they've been all day. If he'd do that to you, to an admiral, what has he been doing to me? The question hangs between us. We both know the answer. I'm sorry, I tell her. I should have said something sooner. You did say something, she reminds me. Last month, when you asked if I was happy. I told you I was fine. But you weren't. No, she agrees. I wasn't. We sit in the gathering darkness, neither of us moving to turn on lights. Outside, the neighborhood is settling into evening, distant sounds of cars, a dog barking, someone's wind chimes. What are you going to do? I ask finally. Mom takes a long breath. I'm going to ask him not to come back. Not tonight, not tomorrow. Not until I figure out if this is something that can be fixed or if it's just who he is. I think about Brad, about the way he tried to justify and minimize what happened. About how quickly he shifted from shock to defensiveness to blaming me for not warning him I was on an important call. Can I tell you something? I say, as someone who's spent 20 years evaluating leaders? She nods. People who react the way he did, who grab and yell, and then immediately try to reframe it as someone else's fault, they don't usually change. Not without serious intervention. And even then, I trail off, but Mom understands. I know, she says. I think I've known for a while. I just didn't want to admit I'd made another mistake. Choosing someone who seemed stable and then discovering they're controlling isn't a mistake, I tell her firmly. That's them being good at hiding who they are. That's manipulation, not your poor judgment. Her eyes fill with tears. You're good at this. The command voice thing. Making people feel less stupid. You're not stupid, I say. You're human. And you trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's on him, not you. She nods, wiping her eyes with the dish towel she's still holding. We sit together in the dark until she's ready to move. When she finally stands, she seems steadier. Still shaken, still processing, but no longer drowning. Thank you for being here, she says. Always, I reply. That's not negotiable. She almost smiles. Using rank on your own mother? Whatever works, I say. This time she does smile, just a little. It's the first time all day her expression has reached her eyes. The next morning starts with false calm. Brad returns just after 800 hours, letting himself in with the key Mom hasn't yet asked him to return. I'm in the kitchen making coffee when I hear the door. Mom tenses immediately. She's at the table with her hands wrapped around a mug that's already empty. He walks in carrying flowers, grocery store carnations, still in the plastic wrapper. His face is set in careful neutrality, but I can see the effort it's taking. Caroline, he says. Not Care or Caro. He's being careful. Can we talk? Mom glances at me. I stay where I am, neither leaving nor intervening, just present. All right, she says quietly. He sets the flowers on the counter without looking for a vase, then turns to me. Ma'am. The word is clipped, formal. He can't quite meet my eyes. I owe you an apology. I wait. What I did yesterday was completely out of line. I had no right to grab your phone. I had no right to yell at. He stops, swallows hard. At whoever was on the line. I let my temper get the better of me, and that's unacceptable. The apology is technically correct, hitting all the right notes. But there's something off about it, something rehearsed. Like he practiced in front of a mirror, finding the words that would sound right without requiring him to actually examine his behavior. Apology noted, I say neutrally. He nods, then turns back to Mom. Can we talk privately? No, Mom says. The word is soft, but firm. Whatever you need to say, you can say here. His jaw tightens slightly. He doesn't like that answer, doesn't like the shift in power dynamics, but he's trapped by his own apology. He can't reasonably object without undermining everything he just said. All right, he says slowly. I wanted to explain what happened yesterday. I know it looked bad, it was bad, Mom interrupts gently. He pauses, recalibrating. You're right. It was bad. But I want you to understand why I reacted that way. And here it comes, the justification disguised as explanation, the shifting of responsibility disguised as self-awareness. I've been under a lot of stress lately, he continues. Work has been intense, the unit's dealing with some personnel issues, and I brought that home with me. That's not fair to you, and I recognize that. Brad, just let me finish, he says, a hint of command creeping into his voice. He catches himself immediately, softening his tone. Please. Mom nods reluctantly. I know I've been difficult lately. I know I've been on edge. And yesterday, when I saw Elena on her phone, ignoring, he stops himself. When I thought she was ignoring me, I reacted badly. I shouldn't have grabbed the phone. That was wrong. It's a textbook non-apology. Acknowledging the action while burying it under context and explanation, making it sound like an isolated incident rather than part of a pattern. The thing is, Brad continues, I think we've both been on edge. Both of us bringing stress into the relationship. And maybe we need to work on communicating better so these situations don't escalate. Mom's face changes. I can see her processing the shift from apology to shared responsibility, from him owning his behavior to both of them needing to improve. Brad, she says carefully, you didn't grab my phone. You grabbed Elena's phone while she was talking to the president. That's not a communication issue. I understand that, and before that, she continues, her voice getting stronger, you've been making comments. Small criticisms. Little rules about how things should be done in your house. Our house, he corrects automatically. It's my house, Mom says. You don't pay rent. You don't own it. It's mine. The air in the kitchen shifts. Brad's face flushes slightly. I didn't mean, I know what you meant, Mom says. She's not yelling, not even raising her voice. But there's steel underneath now, something I recognize from my own childhood when she'd made a decision and wouldn't be moved from it. You meant that you expect control. That you expect me to check with you before making decisions. That you expect my daughter to jump when you speak. That's not fair, Brad says. His hands are clenching and unclenching at his sides. I've been supportive. I've been here for you. You've been controlling, Mom says quietly. And I let you, because I was lonely and you seemed so certain about everything. But that ends now. Caroline, I need you to leave, she says. And I need you to leave your key. Brad stares at her like she's spoken a foreign language. You're overreacting. One incident and you're throwing away 6 months. It's not one incident, I say quietly. They both turn to look at me. It's a pattern. The comments about women in command. The way you speak to her. The way you corrected her when she told stories. The way you made every room feel like your territory. I don't have to take this from you, Brad snaps, his careful composure cracking. You come here twice a year, spend a weekend, and think you know everything about our relationship? I know you grabbed my phone and screamed at the president, I say evenly. I know that's how you react when you don't get immediate compliance. That tells me everything I need to know. He takes a step toward me, not threatening exactly but aggressive. You think your rank means you can talk to me like that? I think my rank means I recognize toxic leadership when I see it, I reply. And I've seen it plenty over 20 years. Mom stands, her chair scraping loudly. Brad, leave. Now. He pivots back to her, desperation starting to show through the anger. You're really doing this? You're really choosing, he gestures at me. This? Her opinion over what we've built. We haven't built anything, Mom says. Her voice cracks slightly but holds. You've built rules. I've just been following them. For a long moment, nobody moves. Brad's breathing is heavy, his face red. I can see him trying to find an angle, a way to regain control of a situation that's slipping away from him. Finally, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a key ring. He removes one key with shaking hands and sets it on the counter with exaggerated care. This is a mistake, he says. You're both making a huge mistake. Neither of us responds. He walks out, not quite slamming the door but closing it hard enough to make a point. Through the window, we watch him get into his truck and sit there for several minutes, staring at the steering wheel. Eventually, he drives away. Mom sinks back into her chair. She's trembling. You did the right thing, I tell her. Then why does it feel so awful, she whispers. Because you're human, I say. Because endings hurt even when they're necessary. Because you wanted it to be different than it was. She nods, tears sliding down her face. I move to sit beside her, and she leans against my shoulder the way I used to lean against hers when I was young and the world felt too big. We stay like that until the coffee gets cold and the morning shifts into afternoon and she's ready to start figuring out what comes next. Tables turn slowly, then all at once. In the days following Brad's departure, Mom starts reclaiming her space in small, deliberate ways. She moves furniture back to where it was before he suggested better traffic flow. She turns the thermostat to the temperature she actually prefers instead of the setting he insisted was more efficient. She leaves dishes in the sink overnight without guilt. Each change is minor, but together they represent something larger, The reclamation of autonomy she didn't fully realize she'd surrendered. I extend my leave, citing personal time I'm owed anyway. My chief of staff, Commander Hale, doesn't ask questions, just confirms he'll handle the routine briefs and forward anything urgent. Mom and I fall into a rhythm. Morning coffee without commentary on how it's made. Lunch at whatever time we get hungry. Dinners that don't require planning or justification. She starts talking more freely, no longer editing herself mid-sentence or checking to see if her opinions will be challenged. She laughs louder. She leaves lights on in rooms she's not currently occupying without feeling wasteful. One afternoon, she rearranges the living room completely, moving the couch to face the windows instead of the TV, relocating chairs, taking down curtains Brad insisted made the room cozier, but mostly just made it darker. "This is how I always wanted it," she says, standing back to admire her work. But he said it didn't make sense, that people don't arrange rooms this way. "It's your house," I remind her. "It should make sense to you." She smiles, and it's genuine this time, reaching her eyes. Meanwhile, Brad tries to maintain contact. The first text comes 2 days after he leaves. "I think we both said things we didn't mean. Can we talk like adults?" Mom shows it to me. I don't tell her what to do, that's not my role here, but I do ask, "Do you want to talk to him?" She reads the message again, really reads it, looking past the reasonable tone to the underlying assumption that she overreacted, that she's being childish, that the mature thing would be to let him explain himself back into her life. She deletes it without responding. The next message comes 3 days later, longer this time. He's been doing some reflecting. He recognizes he has some growth areas. He's willing to work on things if she is. The language is therapeutic without being specific, acknowledging fault in the abstract while avoiding concrete examples of what he actually did wrong. Mom reads it twice, then sets her phone face down on the counter. "He's not apologizing for what he did," she says. "He's apologizing for the consequences." "That's exactly right," I confirm. She doesn't respond to that one either. His attempts escalate. A voicemail about throwing away something real over a misunderstanding. An email suggesting couples counseling, as if the problem is relationship dynamics rather than his behavior. A message through his sister, someone Mom barely knows, asking if they can just talk in person. Mom blocks his number after the 6th text in a single day. Through military connections I'd rather not admit using, I hear things about Brad's situation at his unit. Nothing official, nothing on record, but the kind of talk that happens in break rooms and over unofficial beers. He's being watched more carefully. A few junior soldiers mentioned to their NCOs that SFC Keller seems on edge, that he's been short with people, that he's made comments about women causing problems. His platoon sergeant had a quiet word with him about maintaining professionalism. It's not career-ending. He's not being investigated or disciplined. But there are eyes on him now, attention from people who might have overlooked minor issues before but are now paying closer attention to patterns. Meanwhile, Mom undergoes her own transformation, less visible but more profound. She starts reconnecting with friends she'd gradually drifted from during the relationship. Women who'd invited her to book club or lunch, invitations she'd declined because Brad found reasons why she shouldn't go. "Those women just gossip," he'd said. "You're better than that." Now she accepts every invitation, rebuilding connections one coffee date at a time. She joins a community gardening group, something she'd mentioned wanting to do before Brad convinced her it was too much commitment, and she needed to focus on organizing the house first. She buys clothes in colors he deemed too bright for someone her age, a coral blouse, a teal scarf, a yellow cardigan that makes her smile every time she wears it. Small rebellions, each one a brick in the wall of her rebuilt self. One evening, about 2 weeks after Brad left, she's sitting in the living room she rearranged, reading a book he dismissed as romance trash, even though it's actually historical fiction. "I forgot who I was," she says suddenly, not looking up from the page. "With him. I forgot the parts of myself that didn't fit his idea of how I should be." "And now?" I ask. "Now I'm remembering," she says. She closes the book, marking her place with her finger. "It's strange. I thought having someone would make me feel less alone. But I was lonelier with him than I'd been by myself. Does that make sense?" Complete sense, I tell her. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about not being seen. And he didn't see you, he saw a woman who needed to be managed. She nods slowly. Why did I let that happen? Because you're human, I say. Because you wanted companionship and he seemed stable. Because he was good at making his control seem like care. And because I'd been alone so long I forgot that being alone isn't actually the worst thing, she adds quietly. We sit together in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of knowing each other deeply. Through the window, the neighborhood is settling into evening, the same familiar sounds as always, but somehow they feel different now. Lighter, maybe. Or just more honest. Mom's phone buzzes with a text. She glances at it, and her expression shifts. It's Brad, she says. Through a different number. She shows me the screen. I'm not giving up on us. You mean too much to me. The message is designed to sound romantic, devoted. But underneath is the same refusal to accept her decision, the same assumption that his persistence should eventually wear down her resistance. Mom looks at the message for a long time. Then she blocks this number too, and adds his email to her spam filter for good measure. I'm done, she says simply. I'm just done. And I can hear in her voice that she means it. Not angry, not hurt, just finished with giving space to someone who used it to make her smaller. The transformation isn't complete yet. She still has moments of doubt, times when she second-guesses her decision or wonders if she was too harsh. But each day she reclaims a little more territory, builds a little more confidence, remembers a little more clearly who she was before she started editing herself to fit his expectations. And I stay present, not fixing or managing, just being here while she finds her way back to herself. 3 weeks after Brad's departure, something shifts in how Mom carries herself. It's subtle but unmistakable. The way she walks into rooms, the steadiness in her voice, the absence of that constant low-level tension she'd been carrying for months. We're having breakfast when she brings it up. I've been thinking, she says, spreading jam on toast with more attention than the task requires. About patterns. About how I got here. I wait, letting her find the words. After your father left, I told myself I'd never need anyone again. I'd be completely self-sufficient. And I was, for a long time. Maybe too long. She sets down the knife. When Brad came along, I think I was so ready for someone steady that I missed all the signs that steady was really just rigid. That's not uncommon, I say carefully. Especially after years of handling everything alone. But I should have known better, she continues. I raised a daughter to be strong and independent. I taught you to recognize when people were trying to diminish you. And then I let someone do exactly that to me. Mom, let me finish, she says gently. I need to say this. I nod. I was ashamed, she admits. When you'd visit and I could see you noticing things. The way he'd talk over me or correct how I did simple tasks. I was ashamed that I was letting it happen, that I wasn't standing up for myself the way I'd taught you to. You were in it, I tell her. It's different when you're inside the situation. I've seen senior officers miss warning signs in their own commands because they're too close to it. She considers this. Is that why you didn't say anything earlier? Because you were trying to respect my autonomy. Partly, I admit. I didn't want to be the daughter who couldn't let her mother make her own choices. But I also should have been clearer about what I was seeing. I let concern about overstepping prevent me from speaking up when you needed me to. We both failed ourselves a little bit, Mom says. You by staying too quiet, me by not listening to what you weren't saying. She's right, and the honesty of it sits between us, not comfortable, but necessary. When he grabbed your phone, she says, it was like someone turned on all the lights at once. I couldn't unsee it anymore. The entitlement, the assumption that he could control everything in his space, including people who weren't his to control. And seeing him grab something from an admiral, it wasn't about your rank, she interrupts. It was about watching him treat you the way he'd been treating me. Small moments I'd rationalized suddenly looked different when they were happening to someone else. I think about this. How we can normalize things done to us that would enrage us if we saw them done to someone we love. The phone wasn't the problem, Mom continues. It was just the moment everything crystallized. All the small boundary violations, all the little corrections, all the times he made decisions about my life without asking. They all added up to the same thing, someone who believed his comfort mattered more than my autonomy. What are you going to do with all this? I ask. The understanding, the clarity? She smiles, but it's complicated. I'm going to remember it. Next time, if there is a next time, I'll know what to look for. Not just the obvious warning signs, but the subtle ones. The way someone reacts when I disagree. Whether they celebrate my independence or try to manage it. That's evolved thinking, I tell her. It's expensive thinking, she corrects. Paid for with 6 months of walking on eggshells. But maybe that's how we learn the lessons that actually stick. Her phone buzzes. We both tense slightly. It's been several days since Brad's last attempt at contact, but we're still waiting for the next one. But it's just her friend Margaret, asking about book club. Mom responds immediately, confirming she'll be there. You seem lighter, I observe. I feel lighter, she agrees. Like I was carrying something heavy I didn't realize I could set down. We finish breakfast in comfortable silence. Outside, the morning is bright and clear, and through the window I can see Mom's garden, slightly overgrown during the Brad months, but she's been working on it again, trimming back the excess and encouraging what she actually wants to grow. When do you have to go back? She asks. 2 more days, I tell her. Unless you need me to stay longer. She shakes her head. I'm okay. I really am. Sad sometimes, yes. Second-guessing myself occasionally. But okay underneath all that. That's all anyone can ask for, I say. She reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. Thank you for being here. For not saying I told you so. For just being my daughter instead of an admiral. You get both, I tell her. Whether you want them or not. She laughs, and it sounds like it used to, full and unself-conscious and completely hers. Later that afternoon, while Mom is at her gardening group, I get a call from Commander Hale. Ma'am, he says, his tone carefully neutral. I thought you should know. There's been some unofficial chatter through Army channels. About an incident involving SFC Keller. What kind of incident? He had a confrontation with a female lieutenant at a joint training exercise. Got in her space, raised his voice when she gave him a directive about safety protocols. She documented it. His chain of command is looking into it. I process this information. Pattern of behavior? Looks that way, Hale confirms. The lieutenant mentioned she almost didn't report it because it seemed minor, but then someone mentioned they'd heard he had boundary issues. Once she knew it wasn't isolated, she felt it was worth documenting. Good for her, I say. Yes, ma'am. Just thought you'd want to know. No action required on your end. It's entirely Army business. After we disconnect, I sit with this information. Brad's behavior is catching up with him, not through any action I took, but through the natural consequences of repeatedly crossing lines. One person might excuse it. 2 might still question themselves. But a pattern once identified becomes impossible to dismiss. I don't feel satisfaction exactly, more like confirmation. That what happened in Mom's kitchen wasn't an anomaly, wasn't stress or misunderstanding. It was who he is when he doesn't get immediate compliance. When Mom gets home, I tell her about the call. Not because she needs to do anything about it, but because I think she deserves to know her instincts were right. I'm not surprised, she says quietly. Sad, but not surprised. Sad? For whoever else was dealing with his behavior. For the people who didn't have an admiral daughter to help them see clearly. She sets down her gardening gloves. I was lucky in a strange way. That phone call, that moment, it was dramatic enough that I couldn't rationalize it away. Some people don't get that clarity. They just keep adjusting and accommodating until they don't recognize themselves anymore. She's right, and it's a sobering thought. How many people are living smaller lives because someone convinced them that's what love or partnership requires? Do you think he'll actually change? She asks. I consider this carefully. I think he'll learn to be more careful. Whether that's the same as changing. I shrug. Real change requires acknowledging the problem isn't everyone else's sensitivity, it's your behavior. I'm not sure he's capable of that. Mom nods slowly. I hope he proves us wrong. Not for him, really. But for whoever he meets next. It's generous of her, that hope. More generous than he probably deserves. But that's who she is, someone who wants people to be better than they've shown themselves to be, even when all the evidence suggests they won't be. We spend the evening organizing the house in ways that please her, photos rearranged, books reorganized by preference rather than alphabetical order, small decorative items moved to where she actually wants them. Each change is minor. Each one reclaims a little more territory. And together, they transform the house back into a home that reflects who she actually is, not who someone else needed her to be. Months later, the house feels completely different. Not because anything major has changed physically, but because the atmosphere has shifted from careful tension to genuine ease. I'm visiting again, this time for Thanksgiving, a holiday we'll celebrate without having to manage anyone else's expectations or preferences. Mom has changed in ways both obvious and subtle. She's wearing more colors, speaking with more certainty, laughing more freely. She's organized a regular coffee group with women from her old book club, joined a local theater group that reads plays aloud once a month, and started taking a pottery class she's been interested in for years. You seem happy, I tell her as we're preparing dinner. I am happy, she says, and it sounds true. Not in spite of what happened with Brad, but maybe because of it. Does that make sense? Complete sense, I assure her. I needed to remember I could make hard choices, she continues, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. I spent so long being the person who compromised, who kept peace, who made things work. I forgot I was also allowed to make things stop working when they weren't right. That's a hard lesson, I say. But necessary, she adds. And worth learning before I got even deeper in. We work side by side in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window, early snow is starting to fall, the first of the season, light and uncommitted. Have you heard anything about Brad? She asks eventually. I hesitate. I have heard things through the informal networks that exist in military communities, where information travels in unofficial but reliable ways. A little, I admit. He's at a new posting. No major incidents, but his reputation precedes him. People are cautious around him. That's probably for the best, Mom says. Cautious is better than trusting blindly. I think about the lieutenant who reported him, about the pattern recognition that protected her from deeper harm. About how Brad's behavior created its own consequences without requiring intervention from anyone he'd wronged. You know what I realized? Mom says. I spent so much energy trying to convince myself he was right, that I needed structure and guidance. But I already had structure. I had a life that worked, routines that made sense, choices that reflected my actual values. What I needed wasn't someone to impose better structure. I needed someone to appreciate the structure I'd already built. That's profound, I tell her. She laughs. It's obvious, you mean? But sometimes obvious things are hardest to see when you're looking for something else entirely. My phone rings, a brief call from my chief of staff confirming details about next week's briefings. Professional, routine, the kind of call that happens dozens of times a week. When I hang up, Mom is watching me with an expression I can't quite read. What? I ask. Nothing, she says. Just thinking about that day. How grabbing your phone and yelling at the president was probably the best thing Brad could have done for me. Because it gave you clarity? Because it showed me I'd been making excuses for unacceptable behavior, she says. If he'd do that to you, to someone with every possible authority and right to be respected, then I didn't need to keep questioning whether his treatment of me was justified. It wasn't. It never was. We finish preparing dinner together, talking about lighter things, my upcoming deployment schedule, her pottery class, Margaret's dramatic book club opinions. But underneath runs a current of understanding we didn't have before, about boundaries and respect, about the difference between being alone and being lonely, about how sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. After dinner, we sit in the living room she rearranged months ago. The furniture faces the windows like she always wanted, and the space feels open and honest. Thank you, she says suddenly. For what? For not making me feel stupid, she says. For being here without taking over. For letting me figure it out at my own pace. You're not stupid, I tell her firmly. You're human. You wanted companionship and you trusted someone who used that trust to diminish you. That's on him, not you. I know, she says. I finally know that all the way through. We sit in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall outside, each of us thinking our own thoughts about authority and respect and the quiet strength it takes to choose yourself. My phone buzzes with a text, Commander Hale again, sending the Thanksgiving wishes he knows I prefer to formal holiday messages. Mom glances at it and smiles. Does it ever feel strange? Having all that authority, all those people reporting to you, and then coming here and just being my daughter. I consider this. No, I say honestly. They're not separate things. Everything I learned about leadership, about boundaries and respect, and the difference between authority and control, I learned from you first. You just didn't know you were teaching it. Her eyes fill with tears. Don't make me cry into the pie. Too late, I say, because I'm tearing up too. We laugh through it, the way you do when emotions are too big for just one response, when sadness and joy and relief all tangle together into something that needs both tears and laughter to express. Later, as we're cleaning up, Mom says, I've been thinking about dating again. Eventually. Not now, but someday. How do you feel about that? Nervous, she admits. But also clearer about what I'm looking for. Someone who sees independence as attractive rather than threatening. Someone who adds to my life rather than trying to reorganize it. That's reasonable, I tell her. And someone who doesn't try to grab phones out of people's hands, she adds with a small smile. Bare minimum, I agree. We finish the dishes together, and the house settles into evening quiet, the comfortable kind, not the tense kind. Through the window, the snow is accumulating on the lawn, transforming the ordinary landscape into something clean and new. I'm proud of you, I tell her as we're turning off lights. For what? Finally leaving someone who was terrible for me. For recognizing it, I say. For making the hard choice. For rebuilding yourself after. That takes more strength than staying ever would have. She hugs me, tight and long. I'm proud of you too. For being exactly who you are. For not letting rank or authority change the parts of you that matter most. We stand there in her entryway, mother and daughter, both of us carrying responsibilities the other can only partially understand, but both of us knowing the essential truth. Real strength isn't about control or authority or rank. It's about knowing your worth and defending it, even when the person challenging it seems confident that you shouldn't. It's about choosing yourself when the alternative is disappearing into someone else's vision of who you should be. And it's about understanding that sometimes the most important command decision you make has nothing to do with fleets or deployments or national security. Sometimes it's just knowing when to say, you're dismissed. 6 months after the phone incident, I receive orders for a deployment that will keep me overseas for the better part of a year. It's expected, part of the rotation schedule, nothing unusual. What is unusual is how differently I feel about leaving Mom this time. Before Brad, I worried about her loneliness, her isolation in the big house by herself. During Brad, I worried about the control he was exerting, the ways she was shrinking herself. Now, preparing to deploy, I don't worry. She's thriving in ways I haven't seen since before I joined the academy. She's social, engaged, confident. She's filled her calendar with activities she chose because they interested her, not because someone else approved of them. I'll miss you, she says as we're having coffee the morning before I fly out. But I'll be fine. Better than fine. I know, I tell her. And I mean it. We talk about mundane things, her pottery class, she's making a bowl that's only slightly lopsided, Margaret's newest book club controversy, whether psychological thrillers count as literature, the garden she's planning for spring. Then she says something that surprises me. I've been thinking about what leadership means. Real leadership, I mean. The kind you demonstrate every day. What about it? It's not about control, she says. It's not about being the loudest or the firmest or making sure everyone knows you're in charge. It's about trust. About creating an environment where people can be their best selves. That's right, I confirm. Brad didn't understand that, she continues. He thought leadership meant dominance. That's why he couldn't handle you being in the room. You represented a reality where his version of authority didn't work. I hadn't thought about it exactly that way, but she's right. His reaction when he learned my rank wasn't just embarrassment about the phone call. It was his entire worldview cracking, the belief that his service, his age, his gender automatically placed him above others in any hierarchy that mattered. You know what the irony is? Mom says. He outranked most people he met. but he couldn't handle the few who outranked him. That says everything about what kind of leader he actually was. Insecure ones always struggle with authority that isn't theirs, I say. I've seen it in officers who can't handle having enlisted sailors with more experience. They feel threatened instead of grateful for the expertise. What do you do with people like that? She asks. Depends on whether they're willing to learn, I say. Some people, when you point out the problem, they reflect and grow. Others double down, insist everyone else is wrong, that the system is flawed. Those are the ones you can't save, you can only limit their impact. Brad was the second kind, Mom says quietly. Yes, I agree. He was. We sit with that truth for a moment, not sad about it anymore, just clear. I got an email from him last week, Mom says. From yet another new address. I tense slightly. What did it say? That he's doing well at his new posting. That he's learned a lot about himself. That he hopes I'm happy. She sips her coffee. Very generic. Very careful. Did you respond? No, she says. There's nothing to say. We're not friends. We're not anything. Responding would just open a door I've closed. I nod. It's the right choice, and she knows it without needing my validation. Do you think he actually learned anything? She asks. Or is he just being more strategic? I don't know, I admit. And honestly, it doesn't matter. He's not your responsibility to fix or understand. Your only responsibility was to yourself, to recognize the situation and remove yourself from it. Which I did, she says, with quiet satisfaction. Which you did, I confirm. Later that day, as I'm finishing packing, my phone rings. It's Commander Hale, calling about a scheduling matter that could have been handled via email. But after we finish the official business, he says, Ma'am, can I ask you something off the record? Go ahead. The SFC Keller situation from last year, he says carefully. I heard through channels that he was involved in an incident with your family. Personal matter, so I never asked. But I wanted you to know, his reputation has caught up with him. Multiple documented instances of boundary issues with subordinates, particularly female personnel. He's being quietly reassigned to a position with no direct reports. I process this. It's not formal punishment, but it's a recognition of the problem. A limitation of his authority based on demonstrated pattern of behavior. Thank you for letting me know, I tell him. The Army lieutenant who filed the first formal complaint, she mentioned she almost didn't because it seemed minor. But then she heard there was a pattern. That's when she decided it was worth documenting. Pattern recognition can be protective, I say. Yes, ma'am. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know. Not career-ending for him, but definitely career-limiting. After we disconnect, I sit with this information. Brad's behavior created its own consequences. Not through my intervention or my mother's complaint, but through his own repeated choices to prioritize control over respect. When I tell Mom, she nods slowly. I hope the women he works with now have easier experiences than I did, she says. I hope the watching eyes make him more careful. That's generous, I tell her. It's self-protective, she corrects. I don't want to spend energy hoping he suffers. I just want to be sure other people are safer than I was. It's a distinction I appreciate between seeking harm and seeking safety for others. The next morning, Mom drives me to the airport. We don't talk much during the drive, comfortable with silence the way only people who know each other deeply can be. At the departure curb, she hugs me tightly. Stay safe. Make good decisions. Don't let anyone grab your phone. I laugh. That last one's a pretty low bar. You'd be surprised how many people can't clear it, she says. As I'm walking away, she calls out, Elena. I turn back. Thank you for being exactly who you are, she says. For showing me what real authority looks like. It helped me recognize what fake authority was trying to do. I nod, not trusting my voice, and head into the terminal. On the flight across the Atlantic, I think about leadership and authority and the difference between the two. About how Brad thought rank and volume and dominance were what mattered, while completely missing the quiet strength that actually earns respect. I think about my mother, rebuilding herself piece by piece after months of being diminished. I think about the sailors I'll be leading during this deployment and the responsibility I have to create environments where they can be their best selves rather than just compliant versions of themselves. And I think about the moment Brad grabbed that phone, so certain he had the right to control what was happening, so confident in his authority. He was wrong about the chain of command. But more importantly, he was wrong about what power actually is. Real power doesn't grab, doesn't shout, doesn't need to dominate every interaction to feel secure. Real power is knowing your worth and defending it. Real power is choosing yourself when someone tries to make you smaller. Real power is my mother, sitting in her rearranged living room, wearing colors someone else thought were too bright, living a life someone else thought needed managing, and being completely, unapologetically herself. That's the kind of authority that matters. That's the kind of leadership worth respecting. And when he stood there, trembling after hearing the president's voice, after realizing he'd grabbed a phone from an admiral, he wasn't just wrong about military rank. He was wrong about everything that actually matters. The plane levels out at cruising altitude, and I open my tablet to review briefing materials for the deployment. But first, I send Mom a quick message, landed safely in terms of departure. Actually airborne now. Remember, you're stronger than anyone who tried to make you feel small. Her response comes through before we lose signal. I know. You taught me that. Now go lead those sailors. They're lucky to have you. I smile, close the tablet, and look out the window at the clouds below. Somewhere down there, Brad Keller is probably still trying to understand what happened, why grabbing that phone, yelling those words, changed everything so quickly. He'll probably never fully understand. Because understanding would require recognizing that authority isn't something you demand or seize or enforce. It's something you earn through respect, integrity, and the quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove itself by making others small. My mother understands that now. And that's the real victory, not his consequences, but her clarity. The flight attendant offers beverages. I accept coffee, settle in for the long flight ahead, and carry with me the knowledge that sometimes the most important thing you can do as a leader, as a daughter, as a human being, is simply be present while someone finds their way back to themselves. Everything else is just rank and noise. What matters is knowing the difference. That's how it unfolded and why everything changed after that phone call. If you've been in a situation where someone tried to control you or undermine your authority, I'd love to hear your experience. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who crossed a line? Did anyone ever mistake your quiet for weakness? And how did you take your power back? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's more coming about boundaries, respect, and the strength it takes to walk away from the wrong people.